For those of you who have not been in the downtown Minneapolis area for a year or a year and a half, it looks significantly different from what it used to be. Right now, City Hall and the Government Center are surrounded by barricades that look like this. There are also armed National Guard members surrounding the premises. For the first time ever, people outside of the courtroom can keep track of what is happening inside real time. Can the president be impeached again? And I'm going to give you the short answer to that one. The short answer is yes. He can also be tried for the same charges that he was facing the first time around, but honestly, that really is a topic for a different day. It's gotten to a point in the night where I can't really tell if there's new snow coming from the sky or if this is just the wind picking up the snow that's over there, tossing it to me this way. Which happens to be today to answer a couple of major questions, a few including whether the trial would be moved out of Hennepin County, whether those officers would be tried all together or separately. 3 others are in critical but stable condition. They were not able to give us any further details on this matter. They are also not just increasing the security presence here, but also here at the governor's residence. This after protesters who had gathered outside of the St. Paul Capitol last Wednesday. But it's definitely not like how it used to be, especially if you knew what the lunch hours used to look like. And let's take a look at the facts here. First of all, President Trump has not taken responsibility for inciting the mob last week in Washington, D.C. and that they were lucky that they were able to find the girl as quickly as they did, given the frigid temperatures that we are seeing here tonight. And before our interview today, he told me that he was on the phone with Attorney General Merrick Garland, who had called him to talk about this very thing. What can you really get for $1 these days? Well, in Brown County, you can find a bargain so big that calling it a steal would be an understatement. Population 278, Murdock, Minnesota, hasn't made headlines, possibly ever, until recently when a public hearing took place involving this church and its new owners applying for a conditional use permit.
It started with this organization, AFA, coming to town and buying the old church building, and then posting on their website that they were going to use this as some sort of a religious center.
AFA, short for Asatru Folk Assembly. The group owns the church but needed a hearing before the city could grant them a permit to use the church, as it was zoned as a residential property before. But the hearing took a turn when residents found out the Southern Poverty Law Center considers the AFA a hate group. Alan Turnage, the law speaker for the Asatru Folk Assembly, denies that label.
We believe that as Northern Europeans, it is not only our birthright but our obligation to maintain that ancestral memory and to give worship, if that's the right word, worship and fealty to our gods and our ancestors.
A lot of the concerns that people had, not just during that public hearing, but the ones after, was the fact that you guys do not accept Black, Indigenous people of color into your congregation. Is this true?
That is true. I mean, it's true both that we don't accept those members and that's the area of concern.
Why is it that you won't let Black, Indigenous people of color into your congregation?
Because, and there are many different analogies, but I think the best analogy is that we view our gods as our ancestors. If we have a family reunion, it's only our family.
This concerned Victoria Guillemard. You're talking to us in the capacity of a resident of Murdock who does not want the AFA to be here.
Yes.
Tell me why.
I don't want a white supremacist group coming into our town and preaching beliefs that are dangerous to other residents of color.
But Murdock City Attorney Don Wilcox, as well as Mayor Craig Kavanaugh, said the conditional use permit authorization was not an argument about beliefs.
The big objection in the city is not so much using the building as having this organization in town at all. And that's 2 different issues. And so you can't use zoning to just keep an organization like that out. Whoever they are, they're protected by the Constitution, free speech, freedom of religion.
Wilcox says regardless of who is in the building, the conditional use permit argument was simply a discussion of building use, and says denying a permit to certain groups would open them up to legal and federal violation troubles. Murdock does not have the resources to fight any kind of legal battle.
No, it certainly does not. It's insured. I mean, the battle would be handled by their insurer, which is the League of Minnesota Cities. But just because insurance might pay the costs isn't necessarily a good argument for doing it if it's wrong.
The authorization of the permit came down Wednesday. Guillemard says now residents who have fought against the use permit for the AFA will focus on educating Murdoch and its surrounding areas about the AFA.
We're fighting their white supremacist beliefs and their belief that only white people, or as they claim, people of Northern European heritage, can practice. If they got rid of that specific tenet and denounced racism and denounced white supremacy, we would not be having this conversation today.
So I get a photograph.
To do someone a favor.
And then I take and make some enlargements.
Takes Al Smith at least a couple of hours.
I'll come down here about 8 o'clock, and I'll be down here till about 11:30, 12 o'clock.
You've always been an artist.
I've always been an artist and a designer and creative director and so forth. And when I was a kid, I spent my whole life drawing with a pencil because I absolutely loved it. And I resurrected that love. And then I started drawing with a passion and a fervor that wouldn't stop.
The portrait that started it all, one of his friend, a Vietnam veteran. This one, like most, started with a prayer, but unlike others, ended with one too.
Each of my drawings before I start, I would pray and I'd ask the Lord to combine my hands and my eyes and my mind together so that I can transfer the image I see onto my blank paper. This is one of my favorite Vietnam ones.
Since then, Smith has made it a mission to capture the soul of a soldier.
He's, 18 years old, 19 years old?
Bring it from the past to picture.
Can you imagine what's on his mind? As I'm drawing them, I think about them, and I think about their life growing up and what it was like for them and what it was like being a SEAL and how difficult was it, where were you and how were you stationed. And I began to have almost an intimate relationship with them.
Start out sketching a stranger, and by the end, you'll have a friend.
There's definitely a spiritual connection, all while I was drawing all these military things, especially when I was doing my first program called the Vietnam Experience. I draw these soldiers. I'm drawing them and I'm wondering about them, like, how are you now? Did you make it out okay? Were you wounded? What is your life like? Do you have any addictions? I even pray for them.
A portrait in this way isn't just graphite on paper, but perhaps also gratitude for the gift of service.
I can't tell you how fulfilling it is. And at the same time, it's exhausting. Oh my goodness, what these boys must have went through,
I dreamed I want to be a pastor.
The role of a hospital chaplain can be one that weighs heavily on one's shoulders.
I started my work last September, so which means I'm doing this job like 6 months.
So you're kind of new to the job.
I'm the baby here. And also it's really first time for me to work out of Japan.
Pastor Kazuhiro Sakino's arrival to Abbott Northwestern in Minneapolis took what could be understood as divine intervention. You came at an incredibly difficult time.
Exactly.
How did you feel about that?
In beginning, I supposed to come here in May, but I canceled 3 times because of pandemic and riot and many things happened in the same time. But somehow I could come here in July. It was almost a miracle.
Because a chaplain was so pivotal during the time his family spent at the hospital with his sick sister, Sakino says he always knew this work would be his. And here in Minneapolis, halfway across the globe from his home, he felt moved to fold something into the dark COVID routine. Do you remember your first COVID patient?
I was super scared. And of course, it's recommendation. I wear a gown and glove and goggle and half face mask. My language is limited because of half face mask, and time was limited. So that's why I got the idea, I can make a paper crane as a Japanese chaplain and hand him as a symbol of healing and hope. In Japan, making a paper crane, especially collecting 1,000 paper crane and tied together, It is an intense prayer for healing and seeking the peace.
And what better place for healing and peace than a hospital? So Sakino turned to his YouTube channel and asked his Japanese followers, would they be so kind as to send him some cranes?
Some school and some communities start making together, and its amount is 16,000, which I never expected.
16,000 cranes.
Some are long, some are short.
Most of them have taken flight in the main lobby, first to greet patients and visitors.
The hospital is not super fun place to visit. They're looking down because there are so many emotional distress to visit hospital. But once they step into the hospital, first thing they see is this paper crane. So they can look up something they didn't expect.
So physically looking up.
Physically looking up, and plus emotionally.
It takes 24 folds of a square to make just one of these, each fold a prayer or a kind thought from Japan to America with love.
It's kind of a bridge from Japan to here.
As phrases like light at the end of the tunnel start entering our rhetoric again, the origami that carried Abbott Northwestern through a pandemic is morphing its message, reminding us we're inevitably strung together.
See these paper cranes, all colors, all shape are different. I think it displays what our society should be. The colors are different, sizes are different, but we can create one hope together.